Cole Merritt saw the cross on a Tuesday morning in October, sticking 6 feet out of the surface of a shrinking lake in rural Tennessee, and by noon he was standing inside the church it belonged to with water up to his waist and his dog swimming slow circles around the altar. The Dombum, a gray and white German shepherd named Rex, large and deliberate, had gone in first. Cole had not told him to. Rex had walked to the edge of the lake, looked at the cross, looked at Cole, and walked in. Cole had stood on the bank for 30 seconds, watching the bog paddle toward the submerged building, and then he had pulled off his boots and followed. On the altar, sealed inside a military ammunition can that had been bolted to the stone with 4 lag screws driven into the rock 62 years ago by someone who intended it to be found, were 114 letters, one for every family in the town of Mill Haven, Tennessee, a town that had been condemned, evacuated, and drowned under 40 feet of water in the spring of 1962, so that a power company could build a dam 12 miles downstream. A town where, in the 3 weeks between the evacuation notice and the flooding, the people had written letters to whoever would come after, not to anyone specific, to anyone at all, to the future, to the idea that someone would eventually stand where Cole was standing and read what they had left. Nobody had stood there in 62 years. Nobody until now. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe and like this video. And before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Cole Merritt had come to Harlan County, Tennessee, because his sister lived 40 minutes away and he had nowhere else to go. He was 54 years old. He had served 18 years in the Army, 3 tours across Iraq and Afghanistan, the last one ending in 2011 with a discharge that was honorable and a right knee that was not. He had spent the years since working through a list of things that men like him work through: the VA paperwork, the physical therapy, the period of drinking that he did not call a period of drinking until it was over, the slow reconstruction of something resembling a daily life. He was 2 years past the worst of it. He was not all the way back. He was not sure all the way back was a place that existed exactly, but he was moving in a direction that felt right more often than not, and he had learned to count that. He was a man in his early to mid-50s, built tall and lean with the quiet economic movements of someone who has spent a lifetime working. His brown hair, grown a little too long, was streaked with silver at the temples. His face was weathered and rugged, carved by the sun and by memories that were just as harsh. Yet his eyes held a deep, settled kindness that had survived everything. He pulled on his boots, the leather cracked and dark with use. He shrugged into his old brown leather jacket and left it unzipped, revealing the dark flannel shirt beneath. Rex had been with him for 3 years, gotten from a veterans rescue in Nashville, a shepherd who had been returned twice by previous owners for being, in the words of the intake form, too intense. Cole had read that and thought, that's not a disqualifier. That's a description of every person I've ever respected. Rex was 8 now, his coat the gray and white that went almost silver in morning light, his amber eyes tracking everything with the focused calm of an animal that has decided the world is worth paying attention to. Cole had been staying at his sister's place for 6 weeks, helping her with a fence project and some roofing and trying to figure out what came next. His sister Donna was 10 years younger and had the particular patience of someone who loves you enough to give you space without making the space feel like abandonment. She did not ask how he was sleeping. She made coffee in the mornings and left it. That was enough. He had found the lake by accident. He had been driving the county roads in the early morning the way he drove when sleep didn't come. Not going anywhere, just moving. Rex in the passenger seat with his chin on the window edge. And he had come over a rise and seen the lake below him in the October mist. And in the middle of the lake, catching the first light, a cross. He had pulled over and sat for a long time looking at it. A cross sticking out of a lake means a drowned church. A drowned church means a drowned town. He had not known about Mill Haven. He had not known the lake existed. He had not known that 62 years ago, 431 people had been told to pack what they could carry and leave everything else to the water. He found out later. He found out a great deal later. First he found the cross, and then Rex walked into the lake, and then Cole followed him. And then everything else happened in the order it happened. The water was cold. October in Tennessee is not winter, but the lakes remember summer only until they don't. And this one had given it up already. Cole waded into his thighs and then his waist and felt the cold close around him with the particular intimacy of cold water, which does not negotiate. Rex swam ahead, his head up, his stroke unhurried. The church was 30 yards from the bank. At the waterline, the original stone walls were intact. Fieldstone, the kind that lasts, mortared with lime, that had survived 6 decades of submersion better than anyone would have designed for. The roof was gone, collapsed sometime in the decades underwater, but the walls stood to maybe 8 feet above the lake surface. And inside those walls, the water was the same level as outside, flat and dark and still, with the debris of 60 years on the bottom, silt and the soft remains of the pews, and things Cole couldn't identify in the low light. The altar was stone. Stone lasts. It stood at the far end of the nave, still upright, still in place, the water lapping at its base. And on the altar, bolted down, was the ammunition can. Rex had reached it first. He swam to the altar, put his front paws up on the stone, and looked back at Cole. Cole waded to the altar and put his hand on the can and felt the cold of it through the cold of his already cold hands and stood there for a moment in the flooded church with the October sky above, where the roof had been, and the sound of the water moving gently around him. Then he started working the bolts. The bolts had been driven into the altar stone with a power tool. The holes were clean, the threads deep, and they had been there for 62 years in standing water. They did not want to move. Cole had his multi-tool in his jacket pocket, waterproofed out of habit, and he worked each bolt for 10 minutes apiece, breaking the corrosion loose in small increments, his hands going numb in the cold water. Rex had swum back to the bank and was sitting there watching. Cole could see him between the gaps in the stone wall, a gray and white shape in the morning light, perfectly still. The fourth bolt came free, and Cole lifted the can. It was sealed differently than he expected. Not just latched, but welded shut along the lid seam, a bead of lead solder run around the entire perimeter. Someone had not just put this here. Someone had built it to last. Someone had thought, this needs to survive everything. 60 years of water. Whatever comes after 60 years of water. Cole waded back to the bank, his jeans soaked through, his boots in one hand and the can under his arm. He sat down in the dry grass above the waterline and looked at the lake and the cross and the walls of the church just visible above the surface. And he thought about what you put in a box you weld shut and bolt to an altar before your town goes underwater. Rex came and sat beside him, pressing against his wet leg without apparent concern for his own dryness. Cole did not have anything to cut the solder with. He drove back to his sister's house, 40 minutes, heater on full, Rex steaming slightly in the passenger seat, and got his angle grinder from the truck bed and drove back. Donna had come to the door when he pulled in, seen the state of him, and said nothing except, "There's dry clothes on the chair in the hall." He had changed and driven back. He cut the solder seam in 4 minutes. The lid lifted with a sound, not quite a hiss, something flatter, more final, the sound of a sealed space that had held its seal through everything and was now, for the first time in 62 years, open. Inside the can, packed in tight with wax paper between each layer, were envelopes. Thick envelope, thin envelopes, envelopes that had been folded to fit, envelopes that were crisp, and envelopes that had been handled many times before sealing. All of them intact. The wax paper and the welded seal had done their work. Cole lifted one out, and it held together in his hand. Dry, real. The way a thing is real when it has survived what it had no business surviving. He counted them. 114. On the outside of the can, stamped into the metal with a letter punch, the kind of work you do with a hammer and individual letter dies, slow and deliberate and permanent, were the words, Millhaven, Tennessee, 1962. Read these. Cole sat in the dry October grass above the waterline with 114 letters in a military can between his knees and Rex beside him, and the cross of the drowned church catching the noon light 40 yards out in the lake. He did not open the first envelope for a long time. He sat there and thought about what it means to write a letter knowing the water is coming. Knowing that in 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, or 1 week, everything you built and planted and buried and loved in this specific piece of ground will be 40 feet underwater and will stay that way for as long as the dam holds. And you write anyway. You find an envelope and you write anyway, and you bring it to the church and you trust that someone put a box on the altar that will hold. He thought these people trusted the box. They trusted the altar. They trusted that someone would eventually come. Rex put his nose to the edge of the can and breathed in once. Then he lay down with his chin on Cole's knee and did not move. Cole opened the first envelope. The first letter was from a man named Earl Duckett, age 67, farmer, Millhaven Road, third house past the mill. He wrote in a large, deliberate hand, the handwriting of someone who had not written much and was taking care. I was born in this county in 1895. My father was born here. His father came here from North Carolina in 1831 and cleared the land by hand and built the house I am sitting in right now writing this letter. That house is going under the water in 11 days. The power company says we will be compensated. We have been compensated. It is not the same thing as what they are taking. He wrote, I am not writing this because I am angry, although I am writing this because I want someone to know we were here. Earl Duckett was here. His father Robert was here. His grandfather James came down from the mountains with a mule and an axe and built something out of nothing, and it was real and it was ours, and it is being taken, and I want someone someday to know that. He wrote, if you are reading this, you are standing where my church stood. You are standing where 431 people worshiped and married and buried their dead for 130 years. Remember us. That is all I ask. Remember that Millhaven was here. Cole set the letter on the grass beside him and picked up another. This one was from a woman named Ruth Hensley, school teacher, 31 years at Millhaven Elementary, which was also going under. She wrote in small, precise cursive, the handwriting of someone who had written on blackboards for decades. I have taught every child in this town born between 1920 and 1952. I know their names. I know which ones were quick and which ones needed more time and which ones were told they were slow when they were actually just quiet. I am going to write down some of their names here so that someone somewhere will have a record of them existing. She wrote 43 names, just names, no other information. 43 former students of Millhaven Elementary School, listed in what appeared to be alphabetical order, each name written with the same care as the others. Cole read all 43 names. He set that letter down and picked up another. This one was short, half a page, in shaky handwriting that had the quality of age or illness. My name is Walter Cord. I am 81 years old. I have lived in Millhaven my whole life. I was born in the house I am leaving. I expect I will die somewhere else, which is not what I planned. I don't have much to say. I just didn't want to be the only one in this town who didn't write something down. So here I am. Walter Cord. I was here. Cole put the letter down. He did not pick up another one for a while. He sat with the can between his knees in the October sky above him and the lake in front of him and thought about Walter Cord, 81 years old, writing half a page because he didn't want to be the only one who didn't. He thought about what that costs. Not the writing, but the admission in the act of writing it. The admission that the writing matters. That being remembered matters. That you, Walter Cord, with your shaky hand and your half page are worth the space it takes to say, I was here. Rex had not moved from Cole's knee. Cole picked up another envelope. This one was thicker than the others. Inside was a letter, and folded inside the letter, a photograph. Cole unfolded the photograph carefully. It was black and white, a street scene, a main street, storefronts, a gas station, and people in the foreground who had been caught mid-motion by the camera, blurred slightly at the edges in the way of photographs taken without full preparation. On the back, in a different hand than the letter, Millhaven Main Street, July 4th, 1958, the last good Fourth. The letter was from the man who had taken the photograph, a hardware store owner named Gene Paulson, And it was the longest letter in the can, 12 pages, written front and back on hardware store invoice paper. The faint columns of the invoice formed visible underneath his words. He had written the history of Millhaven from its founding to its flooding, everything he knew, everything anyone had ever told him, as completely as he could in the time he had. Population figures, business names, the year the school was built, the year the old bridge washed out and the new one went up, the names of the ministers who had served the church where Cole was now sitting in the grass above the waterline. He wrote at the end, "I know this is not everything. I know I have forgotten things and gotten things wrong and left out people who deserve to be here. I wrote what I could in the time I had. If you find this and you know more, if you are from here or your people were from here, add it. Find a way to add it. Don't let what I missed stay missed." Cole read the 12 pages sitting in the grass with his wet jeans drying in the October sun and Rex beside him, and when he finished, he sat very still for a long time. He had been doing that, sitting very still in a way he didn't used to be able to do. 2 years ago, sitting still for any length of time had been impossible. The kind of impossible that has a physical component, where the body refuses the position regardless of what the mind decides. He had gotten better at it. He was not sure what had made him better at it. Time, maybe, or the absence of the drinking. Or Rex, who modeled stillness with such consistency that Cole had eventually started to absorb it by proximity. He was thinking about Gene Paulson and his 12 pages of invoice paper, and about Earl Duckett, who was angry and wrote it down anyway, and about Ruth Hensley and her 43 names, and about Walter Cord, who wrote half a page so he wouldn't be the only one who didn't. He was thinking, these people did not expect justice. They knew the dam was going in. They knew the water was coming. They wrote anyway. He had met people like that, in the army mostly, people who knew the situation was what it was and chose to do the one thing available to them with as much care as they could manage. He had always respected that more than any other quality, more than courage even, because courage was often about not having time to think. This was different. These people had had time to think, plenty of time, and they had thought and they had written letters anyway. He picked up another envelope. This one had no name on the outside. The handwriting inside was a child's. Large, uneven letters, pencil, the lines not quite straight. "My name is Bobby. I am 8. We have to leave because of them. I don't want to leave. My dog is named Hector. I hope whoever finds this has a dog too." 3 lines, that was all. Cole read it twice. He set it on the grass beside him. He put his hand on Rex's back. He sat there for a long time without picking up another letter. If you have ever read something written by someone who had no reason to believe anyone would ever read it, someone who wrote into silence, into the future, into the pure possibility of being heard, then you already know what was happening in Cole's chest right now. It was not grief exactly. It was something older, something that has no clean name but that every person recognizes when it arrives. Rex lifted his head and looked at the lake. Then he stood up. Cole looked at the lake too. The cross was still there, catching the afternoon light now, the shadow of it falling long across the water. Below the surface, Cole knew, was the nave where those letters had been written. The pews where Earl Duckett and Ruth Hensley and Walter Cord and Bobby and his dog Hector and 110 other families had sat every Sunday for 130 years. Rex walked to the water's edge and stopped. He looked back at Cole. Then he walked in. Not swimming this time. Wading slowly up to his chest, his amber eyes fixed on something below the surface near the base of the far wall that Cole could not see from the bank. "Rex," Cole said at once. The dog did not stop. Cole pulled off his boots and went in after him. The water was colder than the morning. Cole waded to where Rex had stopped, the water at his chest now, his feet finding the silt bottom carefully. Rex was looking down. Cole looked down. In the silt at the base of the east wall, half buried, was a box. Not the ammunition can. Different. Smaller. Wooden. The wood swollen and dark with decades of water, but still holding its shape. It had been there the whole time. 6 feet from the altar. Invisible under the silt until something, the movement of the water when Cole had worked the bolts, maybe, or the current of wreck swimming through, had shifted the bottom enough to reveal the corner of it. Cole reached down and worked it free from the silt with both hands, the cold water closing over his shoulders. He carried it to the bank. The wooden box was small, shoebox-sized, dove-jointed at the corners by someone who had known what they were doing. The wood had swollen tight in 60 years of water, and the lid required a chisel to open without breaking it, which Cole did carefully, sitting in the sun, Rex beside him, his hands still numb from the cold. Inside the box, wrapped in oilcloth that had failed decades ago and resealed by the swelling of the wood itself, was one more letter. And beneath the letter, wrapped separately, 3 objects. Cole picked up the letter. The handwriting was different from everything else he had read, smaller, more controlled, the handwriting of someone accustomed to precision. The paper was thicker than the envelope paper in the can. At the top, no name. Just a date, April 14th, 1962, 2 weeks before the flooding. I am the one who organized the letters. I collected them from every family in Millhaven and sealed them in the can and bolted the can to the altar. And I am going to put this box in the silt at the base of the east wall where the can is visible from, so that if someone finds the can, they might find this too. I don't know if it will survive. I think the wood will hold. I am going to trust the wood. My name is Mara Sutton. I was the minister of this church for 19 years. I am 63 years old. I presided over the baptism of most of the people who wrote those letters, and the weddings of half of them, and the funerals of their parents, and in some cases their children. I know this town the way you know something you have tended for a long time, not perfectly, not without blind spots, but with the particular knowledge that comes from being present across time. I want to tell you something about what happened here, beyond the facts of the dam and the flooding, which you may already know or may be able to find. What happened here was not unusual. There are towns like Millhaven underwater all across this country, drowned for dams and reservoirs, 400 families told to pack and go so that cities downstream could have power or water or flood control. The people who made those decisions were not evil. They were doing a calculation. And in the calculation, 400 families in a small town weighed less than 200,000 families in a city, and the math was not wrong exactly. And the math was also not the whole truth. What the math did not account for was this. A town is not its buildings. A town is not even its people, exactly. People can be moved. A town is the accumulated memory of people in a place over time. The specific memory that lives nowhere else. Earl Duckett's grandfather clearing that land. Ruth Hensley knowing which child needed more time. Walter Cord being born in the house he was leaving. Bobby and his dog, Hector. These things do not relocate. When the water comes, they go under with everything else. And when they go under, they are gone from the world unless someone carries them. We carried what we could. We put it in the can and bolted it to the altar and trusted that the altar would hold. It is field stone and mortar and the faith of 130 years of people who built it to last, and I believe it will hold. I believe someone will come. She wrote, "Whoever you are, I want to ask you something. Not to restore what was lost. That is not possible. Not to seek justice from the power company or the county or the state. That battle was fought and lost 62 years ago, and the people who fought it are mostly gone. I am asking for something smaller and more important. I am asking you to tell people we were here, not in a newspaper, not in a legal brief. Tell the person next to you. Tell whoever is with you right now. Say, there was a town here. Its name was Millhaven. 431 people lived here and wrote letters and trusted that someone would find them. Tell them that Bobby was 8 years old and had a dog named Hector and didn't want to leave. That is enough. That is exactly enough." Cole set the letter down on the grass. He sat without moving for a long time. Rex was sitting beside him in the afternoon light, his gray and white coat warm from the sun now, his amber eyes on the lake. The cross was still there. The walls of the church were still there. Fieldstone and mortar, 130 years and 62 years of water, and still there the way Mara Sutton had believed they would be. He picked up the three objects from the box. The first was a key, a church key, large and iron, the kind that opens a door that hasn't been opened in a very long time. Cole looked at it and understood. The church door. There was a door in the east wall, still intact, still locked. Mara Sutton had kept the key. The second was a folded piece of paper, a list of names. All 114 families of Millhaven with addresses, not the addresses they were going to, the addresses they were leaving. Millhaven Road, Creek Bottom Road, the old numbers of the old streets of a town that no longer existed on any map. The third was a photograph. It showed the interior of the church, the nave, the pews full of people, taken from the back looking toward the altar. A Sunday service, probably, the congregation in their good clothes, the light coming through the windows in long angles. On the altar, visible even in the small photograph, the ammunition can, already there, already bolted down. The photograph was dated on the back, April 21st, 1962, 1 week before the water came. They had held one last service. They had sat in the pews of their church knowing the water was coming in 7 days. Mara Sutton had stood at the altar with the can already bolted behind her and had given whatever you give to 431 people who are about to lose everything they have ever known. Cole looked at the photograph for a long time. He thought about what it would take to sit in that pew. He thought about the particular kind of courage that is not dramatic, not the courage of a single moment, but the courage of sitting still in the face of something enormous and continuing to be present, the courage of writing a letter, the courage of trusting the altar. He had spent 3 years trying to find that kind of courage, the kind that doesn't require action, the kind that just requires staying. He thought, these people had it. They had it in abundance, and they left it here for whoever came after. Rex stood up and walked to the water's edge again. He looked at the cross, then he looked at Cole. Cole stood up. He walked to the water's edge and stood beside the dog and looked at the cross and the walls of the church and the surface of the lake, still in the afternoon calm, reflecting the sky. 431 people, Earl and Ruth and Walter and Bobby and Mara, 130 years of Sundays. A last service on April 21st with the can already bolted to the altar. 7 days and then the water, he said quietly, to no one in particular, and to all of them at once. I found you. Rex pressed against his leg. The cross was still there. The water was still. Cole did not leave Harlan County. He told his sister what he had found that same evening at the kitchen table. He put the letters on the table between them and let her read a few. She read Earl Duckett's letter and Ruth Hensley's list of names and Bobby's 3 lines. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" Cole said, "I don't know yet. Something." He drove to the County Historical Society in the nearest town the next morning. The archivist, a woman named Carolyn Briggs, who wore her reading glasses on a chain around her neck and set them on her nose before answering any serious question, had heard of Millhaven. Of course she had heard of it. She had a file. The file was thin, a county survey from 1961, a list of property transfers, a compensation ledger. No photographs, no letters, no names beyond the property owners. She looked at the ammunition can on her desk and the stack of letters beside it and was very quiet for a moment. "Where did you find these?" she said. Cole told her. She set her reading glasses on her nose. "I've driven past that lake 100 times," she said. "I never knew what was in it." They worked together for 3 weeks. Carolyn knew how to handle documents, and Cole knew how to work. And between them, they cataloged all 114 letters, photographed each one, cross-referenced the names with the county compensation ledger to build a complete list of Millhaven's families. Carolyn contacted the State Historical Society. She contacted a university archive in Nashville. She contacted 3 newspapers, and 2 of them ran stories. And one of the stories was picked up by a wire service and ran in papers in 4 states. 2 things happened after the stories ran. The first, people wrote in. Descendants of Millhaven families, Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the 431, scattered now across Tennessee and Kentucky and Indiana and further, wrote to the Historical Society asking about the letters. Carolyn answered every one. Some of them drove to Harlan County. Cole met several of them at the lake, standing on the bank looking at the cross, and he told them what he had found and how he had found it and what the church looked like inside. One woman, a granddaughter of Earl Duckett, 60 years old, who had driven from Cincinnati, stood at the water's edge for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "He never talked about it. Not once in my whole life. I didn't know any of this." Cole said, "He wrote it down." She looked at the cross. She said, "He did." The second thing, a boy named Robert Webb, age 70, retired teacher, contacted the Historical Society from a town in Kentucky. He said his father's name had been Robert Webb, known to everyone as Bobby. He had died in 2019. He had never talked about Millhaven. He had never talked about a dog named Hector. Robert Webb drove down on a Saturday in December. Cole met him at the lake. They stood on the bank together, and Cole gave him the letter, the original 3 lines in pencil, and Robert Webb held it in both hands and did not speak for a very long time. Cole did not speak either. Rex sat between them. After a while, Robert Webb said, "He was 8. Cole said, "I know." Robert Webb folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He stood at the water's edge for another long moment. Then he said, "Thank you for going in." Cole looked at the cross. He thought about what it had cost Mara Sutton to collect those letters. The conversations she must have had, going door to door in a town that was grieving, asking people to write down what they were losing, to trust that the writing would survive. He thought about the last service on April 21st, the can already bolted to the altar, the congregation in their good clothes. He thought about the faith required to believe, in that moment, that someone would come. He thought about Rex walking into the lake without being told. He had not fixed anything. The dam was still there. The town was still underwater. The power company that had flooded Millhaven in 1962 had been bought and merged and absorbed until there was no one left to hold accountable, even if accountability had been possible, which it wasn't, not after 62 years. The math that had weighed 400 families against 200,000 was still the math, and the answer was still the same, and nothing Cole had done changed it. But 114 letters were in a climate-controlled archive in Nashville now. Ruth Hensley's 43 names were in a database where descendants could search them. Bobby Webb's 3 lines were in his son's jacket pocket. Earl Duckett's anger was on record. Mara Sutton had asked him to tell people. He had told people. That was what she had asked for. That was exactly what she had asked for. Rex walked a half step ahead of him, back to the truck, the way he always walked when they were done with something and it was time to go. Cole did not look back at the cross. He had looked at it enough times now. He knew it was there. He would know it was there for the rest of his life. The way you know the location of certain things without having to check. Things that have become part of the geography of who you are. He drove back to his sister's house. It was late afternoon. Donna had left the porch light on. He sat on the porch steps for a while with Rex beside him, watching the dark come in over the hills. He was thinking about Bobby. 8 years old, pencil, 3 lines. "My name is Bobby. I hope whoever finds this has a dog too." He put his hand on Rex's back. He thought, Bobby, I had a dog. His name was Rex. We went in. He sat there until the dark was full and the porch light was the only light, and Rex stayed beside him the whole time, and that was enough. That was more than enough. He never found out who put the wooden box in the silt, whether it was Mara Sutton herself, placing it after the can was bolted, or someone else entirely. The letter didn't say. He had asked Carolyn. She didn't know. Some questions stay open. He had learned to let them.